Button. Okay. Welcome to our, I guess, semi-annual now episodes of Deep in the Dogma. Because I've just been so busy with the with everything, with real life that can't really do this, but as often as I want to. But I wanted to kind of come back and now that I have a few weeks here of relative free time. I was going to try to get a couple hangouts in, and I really wanted to get this one in because it's a. I thought it was just a very interesting topic. It started off when Floyd linked a article from a blogger named Valerie Torrico on Evangelical Christianity's brand, and whether or not it was used up. She used a lot of comparisons to branding within the business world and such, and how over a certain amount of time that it's no longer a desirable label to have on something, and that whether or not this is actually affecting how people view evangelical Christians now, especially in America. And when I first read the article, I thought it was really good. It was a completely different kind of angle that I hadn't really thought of before, and so I wanted to dive into it and actually take a look at whether or not I actually did agree with it, because a lot of times my first intuition on things is wrong, so wanted to kind of dig a little more into it. So got the article. I'm going to post the link outside for anybody else that wants to read it first off, and going to kind of discuss some of the points that she brings up within this article with the rest of you guys in this room here. So, I mean, first off, did everybody get a chance to read it? I know, Floyd, you did, right? Anybody else?
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
I've only got part way through it.
Managed to get through it all.
Xbox is like 500 words. No, I'm joking. No, it's a pretty long blog, but it's pretty good. I think it's one of the interesting things here is that when we're discussing this is it isn't. We're not talking about the truthfulness of the idea of whether or not evangelical Christianism is the right form of Christianity, or whether or not Christianity is true in general. This is just the way I like to think of it is like, what damage are Christians doing to their own religion? So I mean, just to start off there, I mean, like, Holy, you're I think the only theist here on the panel there. What were your kind of you said beforehand, before we came in the room, that this is a lot of the stuff that you've kind of have been put out, that you've put out there in the past as well, right?
Right. When it talks about the evangelical Christian church being hijacked by the Republican Party, I absolutely agree with that. I don't see that as being untrue at all. The fact is that we have Christians now that are toting Trump as a godly man. That actually exists in America. And this is, I don't know if you ever. Oh gosh, I don't know if you read the blog by, I kind of linked it a while ago and someone had reshared it. I think J.D. King, and of all people, reshared it, but Barely Protestant wrote a blog and talked about, just how godly, quote unquote, Trump is, and how to get elected as a Republican Christian, from the evangelicals. And
yeah, I remember reading
it's
that
awful.
one.
It's awful because there's nothing there that matches up with evangelical morality at all. But for some reason, he's touted as the better option, and I think part of the hijacking of the Republican Party, or I'm sorry, of both, evangelical church being hijacked by it at the same time, is kind of twisting the arm, is they're taking some hardline stances on abortion and things like that, and that is now an arm twisting. I consider that an arm twisting technique to make Christians feel morally obligated, if they're pro-life, to vote Republican. So I find that to be very true, and it is a little bit harsh, but I don't think it's untrue, because I have met so many people that conflate their politics with their religion back and forth.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a repeating trend throughout this article, is that it talks about the internal conflicts between the different sects or different viewpoints on Christianity, and where this divide goes, and is kind of pushing people apart there. And the Republican one's an interesting one, because you're right. Even the article brings this up, is that the Republican Party touts himself as the the party with family values or Christian values. That they're the ones that are going to stand up for the unborn's rights, or they're going to fight for the people that can't fight for themselves type thing. And they also, what they end up doing as well with this is they create a divide, because they put out this message that if you're not a Republican, if you're not in line with these Christian family values, then you're wrong. If you're voting Democratic, you are voting against your faith. And that puts a huge divide between people, because I know a lot of people that would make comments like that Jesus would be a socialist if he was alive today,
Right.
and that Jesus definitely would not be voting with the Republican Party. So again, I think that it's another example of this chasm that's forming in between, with evangelicals on one side and moderates on the other. But this brings up one of the points that they were at the beginning as well, is that I guess one of the main things with the article itself is the evangelical name so tainted that people really should just abandon it. They do a couple interviews, or they mention of a couple ministers or pastors that don't even want to use the title evangelical now, just because of the baggage that it contains, or that it carries with it. How about yourself? How do you feel about that?
I have long dropped the term evangelical. I won't use it, and on purpose I don't use it, because it's become attached with certain things, and I'm not alone. There's an author named Shane Claiborne who some people sneer at and call him someone that preaches the social gospel like it's something bad, and he's very into trying to look like you're living out of the Acts church, and he supports the idea of communal living, and he's a dirty, filthy hippie, basically.
Yeah.
When I hear that
Shane
term,
Claiborne is really popular, and he's an example of people leaving evangelical Christianity and still following Christianity, but they're trying to do something different than what they're seeing in the churches.
When I hear that term, I hear evangelical fundamentalist, right? I always think of an extremist. Like these things kind of always seem to kind of link together in my mind when I hear that evangelical term get thrown around. And I don't know if that's a more recent thing, or if my memory's not that good.
Well, I think it is recent, and again, it's the point of the article is that, especially in Western culture nowadays, if you within a lot of people, or within a lot of groups, you mention Islam, and probably religion of peace is not in the top 5 things that people are going to bring up when you bring up the topic of Islam. That's an example of, in Western culture, there's a negative branding that's been associated with that, and how much further is it going to go before evangelicals are going to be in the same boat, where just the mention of evangelicals is just going to bring up feelings of just that you want to be separated from that name.
Can I challenge one thing about this? Is that
Sure.
So the article goes on to say that it focuses kind of on the Republican branding, but it ends up saying that I love this quote. It says, "Even Jesus is too small a fig leaf to hide the fact that outsiders looking at the evangelical Christianity see more prick than heart." And it starts laying blame a little bit on some of the bullying, the fear and the weakness. It says the aggressive ignorance, a proud aggressive ignorance, and as I read it, and I just read it recently, but what was going through my mind is it that evangelicalism has become politicized and too far to the right, or is it that it's actually moved the other way? People have moved away from it, and it's remaining out on this edge a little bit. Because I think back to like the 1980s, and my parents weren't evangelicals, but they aligned themselves with some of the things that would be the prickish part of it today. But today, a lot of people I speak to have moved to the left, socially anyway.
Yeah, this is
You mean
true,
a lot of
but
people that call themselves evangelicals have moved to the left socially, but still call themselves evangelicals. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that it's not maybe it's a little bit more that socially the country's moved to the left, and it's left this wing out there that's been politicized and taken advantage of by the Republican Party. Um, but they are holding values that were mainstream 30 years ago, right?
Well, yeah, I don't disagree with that, but yeah, I mean, as society has moved more to the left, and that there's been kind of a more liberal acceptance of things like homosexuality, for example, is that, well, we are advancing, you could say, as a society towards acceptance of people and their different orientations. There, the it's exposing that back then evangelicals can hide within the mass, but as the 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 liberal view moves more to the left, the mass that they're hiding under gets more exposed as the remnants are still sticking behind.
Yeah, I remember when Ronald Reagan ran for office, he spoke at an evangelical convention. And I remember him saying, it's like, I know you can't support me, but I support all of you. And he got a big applause for that. And he really got the evangelicals on his side. And I think ever since then, the Republicans have kind of been running with that. But I think it's starting to run its course at this point.
Well, I was a little bit, I don't know, I wasn't thrilled with this. I mean, I know it's a blog, but, I was hoping at least for like a definition of evangelical and maybe a little bit more support for her claims. So I don't know, I kind of want to talk about that. What exactly is the definition of an evangelical? It's certainly not someone who evangelizes, because that's not enough.
I think that's the point, is that even with no clear kind of, I think that the evangelical movement was this wide encompassing movement of several different, a lot of, or the majority of Protestant denominations within the United States, is that regardless of what evangelical is, the term evangelical is the term that people are kind of viewing now with this stigma attached to it. That even Christians themselves, that as the Holy brought up here, don't even want to associate with that name because of all the baggage that does get linked with it. I would, like even if Holy Spackles would recognize or would be into the evangelical camp, and the Westboro Baptist Church would be under the evangelical camp, they would both be evangelical.
R.C. Sproul is an evangelical, right? But then is Joel Osteen. So what does that mean exactly? They're so different.
What does it mean?
So you know what, that's a good term. It is, regardless of what the term means, it's the term would more likely be associated with the negative aspects of Christianity compared to the positive aspects, and I think that's the point of the article.
When I hear evangelical
I always hear
Christian,
Bible. Oh, good. Sorry.
When I hear evangelical Christian, for me, when they specifically you want to use that term as a description, the first person that comes to mind at the head of evangelical Christianity is Franklin Graham, and whatever he spouts on Twitter.
Yeah,
and he is a great example of a typical evangelical. When you want to tout that as your flag, I'm evangelical Christian, I think Franklin Graham would be a good example.
Yeah, well, that is a good example, because when I hear someone identifies that I'm speaking with, and I ask them anytime I've ever asked what that means, they say Bible-believing Christian.
Yeah, I don't.
That's the definition. So general and ambiguous that I've no clue.
No, I think born-again Christian kind of goes hand in hand with declaring yourself a evangelical, but you're not as much as you used to, but 10, 20 years ago, it's like you have to be born again. I'm a born again Christian, and I think that's kind of morphed into just being an evangelical at this point.
There used to be a time where people would really get into Billy Graham, right? Billy Graham had the Harvest Crusades and the altar calls and stuff like that, and I never heard a word against Billy Graham. He was almost like he was the Protestant evangelical pope or something, and now his son Franklin's pretty wild, and now people are pushing back against Franklin because I think he's
But
pretty
the thing
rough.
is that Billy Graham didn't. I went to a Billy Graham crusade back in the '90s. The it, these were. I feel like a lot of these social views were taken for granted back then. There was
Mhm.
consensus, at least in America, on them, and so you wouldn't have had Billy Graham coming out against them. The article says that to drape over social views that would otherwise be revealed as nakedly evil, that they use Jesus as a fig leaf to drape over these social views that the bloggers saying are evil, but a lot of these are pretty core evangelical and not something that Pope Francis, for instance, would. And Pope Francis is not pro-gay, right? As despite what everyone says, that's he hasn't taken that position, and it's not. I don't see these as being a lot of these values that people have issues are. It's more that I feel like there are progressive Christians or liberal Christians or whatever you want to call them who have social issues with some aspects that other people think are plain readings of Scripture, and I'm not sure that I disagree with them.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think again, like with the article, is that I think that it has to do with the PR department, per se, I guess you could say, is that even if you were to compare it to the Catholic Church, I mean, the same this article can be, I mean, there's some of the reasoning behind it might be different, but you can kind of put the same charges against the Catholic Church, where, again, you start, if you were to talk about the Catholic Church, things that will come out probably within the top 5 things would be things relating to the scandals. The moving priests around, the child molestation issues, like things like that would be associated with the Catholic Church as well. But even with all that, I don't see the Catholic Church still carrying as negative as a stigma as sometimes the term evangelical does. So is that just a matter of the fact that because maybe there's better organization within the Catholic Church, that they have a better PR department to deal with this stuff? Or is
No, that's not it.
I don't. I'm asking. I mean,
Well, Catholics are kinder in some ways. I think that's one thing that a lot of people are probably going to throw rocks at me for. But Catholics are kinder to gays. They are, largely. They really are, on a grander scale. At least they don't say that your very desire is so screwed up. How do I word this? That your attraction is in itself a sin. Like at least they make a differentiation between what you actually do with your body and what you actually, what actually happens, like with natural attraction. But an evangelical will say, God don't make junk, you're a liar, and they will browbeat you until that changes.
Yeah, I was in
Um,
an argument earlier for
that's
a good hour on that exact thing with an
that might be
evangelical,
gray,
and that's what it
right?
played out as.
Right. So that might be gray to you guys, but the Catholic Church is actually quite kinder to certain aspects, and people recognize that. A little more realistic in some ways. And so yeah, there's some aspects to Catholicism that are a little bit, I don't know how to say it, a little less legalistic, oddly. As much as they have the rituals and the other things, they're a little more, I don't know.
Does it seem though
Real.
that from the outside looking in that being harsher and being this like the encounter I'm talking about earlier, that it makes Christianity, and I don't make a differentiation between an evangelical and a Christian, right? So when I hear an evangelical say I'm a Bible believing Christian and things like that, that I would take a harsh view on Christianity if this is what the picture of a Bible believing Christian, or the definition of a Bible believing Christian is. Like,
Yeah. I mean, for a lot of
it
these
seems to hurt the brand, like that was saying.
Mhm.
for a lot of these evangelicals, it's a sin not to vote Republican. In fact, a lot of these evangelical groups, they during election time, they'll actually promote Republicans and they'll campaign for Republicans, but they make it a point where it's a sin to be a Democrat at this point, and a lot of it's, I guess, just over the abortion issue itself.
Yep.
They'll simply vote Republican because Republican are pro-choice. So if you're a Democrat, you're you're basically pro-abortion, so therefore all Democrats are sinners basically.
Yeah, I've been told. Actually, Tommy Hall told me something close to that. He said if I vote left, then I'm basically a murderer. I'm like, okay, well, if you vote right, you're basically a murderer because you're feeding a war machine. Like we can just play shell games back and forth.
What's interesting, though, is that some of that stuff's been, I mean, that stuff's been around for a while. What's new, and this is getting, I guess, to Sokka's point regarding the article, is that by by evangelical Christianity and Republican conservatism being yoked together, by Republicans coming out against things like immigration, then all of a sudden evangelicals go with it. Whereas, ironically, a lot of the Hispanic population coming through the border is Catholic, and so you have these associations with the values of Donald Trump being tied or tethered to evangelicals, such that it goes well beyond even the things that we'd expect, like abortion or homosexuality. It goes into things that are against the poor or against immigrants, and it ends up being a much more complicated ball of things that aren't found within the Gospels. It ends up like accumulating these other things that become Christian values that are nowhere to be found in Scripture, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and to that point, the article goes on and lists a lot of things that evangelical means. They put the article, the writer puts out like evangelical means obsessed with sex, or evangelical means indifferent to the truth, or whatever. And a lot of those things, a lot of the aspects are what Bert's saying is that these might not necessarily be biblical views, or these might not necessarily be things that are very central to the doctrine of their faiths, but because they did get lumped in with political talking points, that they've been adopted and put in the foreground of what does it mean to be this particular brand of Christian, regardless of whether or not these are actually doctrinal issues that need to be addressed or should be part of the regular everyday conversation.
I think it's helpful to know the background of the author. Valerie Tirico is a psychologist who was an evangelical, and she's now an atheist. So she fell out from that, and obviously she was very affected by that. And I think she helps people that were have psychological issues from being a fundamentalist. But her background in evangelicalism was very fundamentalist, and I read her book Trusting Doubt, where she talks about her background and some of the issues that she faced, and her opinions of fundamentalists. So it's helpful to understand where she's coming from when you read these blogs from her.
The quote that Bert put out there is one. It was actually the one that kind of grabbed me when I first read the article, and that was that it's in fact, a secular person is likely to see a kind, generous evangelical neighbor as a decent person in spite of their Christian beliefs, not because of them. Back in the day, they pointed out that somebody would be, when somebody would do something good, you can credit to the fact that they were a good Christian person with good Christian values. And now, when you are looking at people and you make an observation like that, you can, it's become norm to say like this person is good despite the fact that they're, this good Christian person, or they have these Christian values. And I think that's very very prominent here, even within the Google Plus community, where the majority of the Christians that I talk to, they're a lot of the Christians that I talk to here do fit these categories of being, very mean, very ignorant to the truth, or very bigoted, whatever. All these things that she kind of links in this article here. But then again, we have people like the Holy here, or Fiona, or Jade, or other people within this community that are great people. I love talking to them, despite the fact that they are Christian. And I think that was the part that kind of caught me, because where I first kind of when I really kind of felt what the author was saying, because I do share that sentiment. when I because I do expose myself to a lot of different theists in this community, and I'm always surprised when I could have a conversation with one and not have it turn into a very heated bitch fest, to put it lightly.
I just want to point out that you can look at everybody here on a sliding scale of how liberal or how moderate they are, whatever that means on their theology, or if that means their social outlook, or whatever that means. But there are conservative Christians that are loving, that are kind, that are generous. That does exist. That is a thing, that they follow all the rules, and they are willing to not wield a theocracy, but they're still conservative. I don't know if you've met them. They exist.
No, I believe they do, and not every single. I think this is maybe one of the parts of the article that I might disagree with, is the idea that I'm not sure actually even where the article really says this, is that any person that recognizes themselves as a conservative Christian would be put into this category of people that she's talking about. There are people that might be very conservative in their views on their political views, but not as conservative within some of their own religious views, or they may approach it with a different finesse, where they it's a difference between saying, hey, listen, I have a fundamental disagreement with same-sex marriage, for example, and here are my reasons why, compared to, those people don't deserve rights at all and should be boycotted and
throw them
stoned
out of
in
your
the streets.
home, throw
Like
your
an
son out of your house, stuff like that.
Like an ideologue, pretty much, right? Like whatever the theistic version of an ideologue would be.
For me, the difference involves, between these words, just a Christian or a Catholic or any of the other Christian faiths, and then the word evangelical, and then the word fundamentalist. So a lot of the things that she's claiming sort of get attached in the layperson's mind with evangelical, to me, and maybe it's about what part of the United States you're living in. But for me, those work better, or those are more sort of automatic in me. When I hear the word fundamentalist. But the one thing that
I really can't understand the dog's comment, but I'm sure it was a really good one.
Well, the dogs don't agree with me. But let me just say,
he was being dogmatic.
It's so dogmatic. No, but the one thing that I do agree with her about is that, for me, evangelical always goes with politics. Like if someone says I'm an evangelical, I think, oh, that means that they're, that they're Republican, that they're really conservative politically, and so that is what she's kind of getting at, is that was an intentional thing on the Republican Party's part, that they wanted to do a sort of Americanized branding or rebranding to get themselves a bigger base, and that maybe now it's backfiring.
I agree. That's why I said I associate the name with the Grahams. People that are political. The Graham family is extremely political. They've been political.
Well, maybe like I said, there's a lot of things in this list that do associate maybe to the political views here, but there's a couple here that aren't. And maybe we can take a look at those ones, because those ones maybe are the ones that aren't necessarily linked into political ideologies as well, and how we feel about those ones. The first one that stood out was the evangelical means gullible and greedy, and it brings up the idea of guys that push the prosperity gospel, like what's his name, CeeLo Dollar, I think is one of the guys' name, or Joel Osteen is another one. Is that you on that end you have one side of it where people look at this and say this, like, okay, well, yeah, these people are only in it for their money, the people that are pushing this this
praying for a jet plane.
Yeah, praying for a jet plane. I love that. I love that video, by the way. CMO dollars, that's what it is. Sorry. And then on the other side you have the gullible side, which is like all the people that are willing to give these people money. Like,
yeah.
Why?
And the people on TV are always, in my mind, evangelicals, right? So the people on TV are sort of classic, just like Spackle was saying. And yeah, I do agree with that completely. I definitely agree with that. When I think of that word, that's what comes to mind.
Right. There are a lot of Christians that are trying to divorce from the word, and it's a crazy word because I mean this word evangelical means so many things. It can mean R.C. Sproul, or it can mean Joel Osteen. That's like this huge, crazy sliding thing, and so like you're like, what do you mean? You know, and you, even as a Christian, when someone says evangelical, it's like, well, what do you mean? There's no
Yeah, it's
there's
pretty
no one way to
ambiguous.
evangel. Yeah, right. So yeah, I've seen a lot of authors, bloggers, and stuff like that starting to divorce themselves from the title. Like Benjamin L. Corey says, "Hey, I'm an Anabaptist. I'm closer to a Quaker." You have Rachel Held Evans, who is the blogger that's mentioned at the bottom of this article. Rachel Held Evans has become very liberal. She finally now, from my understanding, dropped evangelical and now is Episcopalian. And you have John Pavlovich, and these are pretty big bloggers and stuff like that are selling books and stuff. Shane Claiborne, that are saying, look, we don't think the church in America looks like the Acts Church at all. And so they're actually getting rid of the name, and they're trying to go, well, how best do we look like the Acts Church, or how best do we love our neighbor?
Well, are there any liberal evangelicals that would identify like that? Because it seems like if there are, but it's a real minority, that there already is a thing called conservative Christian, and you would be doubling up on that to say I'm a conservative Christian if this is a way of identifying politics with your religion. So you would need a separate term for that, right? Like saying evangelical means that you're a conservative. In politics, you're a conservative and you're a Christian, and you're melding the two.
Right, so I'm just use high-profile people just as an example. Osteen is maybe considered a little more liberal in some ways, and he's definitely, kind of known to be the smiling pastor that never wants to give you any bad news, right? He's just always like, God will bless you if,
He just has a beautiful smile.
Yeah, right, and
well,
he
but
never
it's the
wants
money
to.
part. It's the money part that makes me think evangelical, as opposed to like a fundamentalist. It's the money part, so that would be her first sort of element there on her list.
Rob Bell, though, left evangelical America, like American Christianity. He's not quite evangelical anymore, and he's been condemned by evangelicals as being a heretic. So he's not quite. He's more emerging church. Is a little more towards that flavor, which is also growing.
So what's the next item?
Well, do you want? So the other ones, the next two that like I said, that might not necessarily be political related, is the idea that first off, evangelical means ignorant. I'm going to read the little blurb here that she puts. The only way to protect creationism is to keep people from understanding how science works and what scientists have discovered. As evidence accumulates related to evolutionary biology, insulating children requires a constant battle to keep accurate information out of textbooks. Insulating adults requires cultivating a deep suspicion of science and scholarship, an anti-intellectualism that diffuses out from this center and defines evangelical culture at large.
So that one to me doesn't fit. I think of a fundamentalist when I hear that passage. I think of the people in the foothills and people in Texas and stuff like that. I think of those people as fundamentalists.
Because I think those two terms have become melded. I really do think they. I live in the South. I've lived around Oklahoma and Texas, New Mexico, Arkansas, and Missouri, right? And that term would be the same term here. Evangelical or fundamentalist. I wouldn't call someone an evangelical fundamentalist. I would use one or the other, but they would both be synonymous. They would both mean the same thing here.
So they're the same. They're the same to you. So yeah, I don't know if that's true everywhere in these crazy states.
I think one of the interesting things is that it's actually, well, the article starts off with the idea that because I think they kind of paint this picture here that I'm going to read this out again. A generation ago, the Republican Party realized that evangelical Christianity could be a valuable acquisition. Evangelical had righteous family values, brand associations, the unassailable name of Jesus, the authority of the Bible, and the organizing infrastructure and social capital of evangelical churches. And it starts off by this idea that a lot of these things that put forward, and we could see that a lot of them are political agendas that are driven under the guise of this evangelical namesake, but it seems like a mutual relationship here. Because when you get down to these ideas like the idea of trying to push creationism, for example, is now this isn't I think necessarily a political viewpoint, but I think it's like the evangelicals' response to, like, hey, we'll support these other things, but we're also going to push this forward too, so you can use us to put this other stuff through here, but in return, you have to take the rest of our baggage on as well and start pushing these ideas towards things like creationism.
I don't know. To me, that's not evangelical necessarily. To me, there's a difference. There's a difference between a fundamentalist and an evangelical. and one of the things that is different is this very issue. So I think of people who are pushing that more as fundamentalists than as evangelicals.
I think,
it's strange. I wonder if it has to do with where you are in the U.S.
It might be too, because I could only approach this from a viewpoint of experiences with evangelical Christians in the U.S., because I know a few evangelical Christians up in Canada here that I don't think meet I would put into the same category as with some of the things that they've put on this list.
Well, I see fundamentalists as a subset of evangelicals. That not all evangelicals are fundamentalists, but all fundamentalists are evangelicals.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
Well, I almost see it backwards as from you.
You see it that there are fundamentalists who are not evangelicals.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me like with the fundamentalist approach to the gospel, the evangelical nature is the taking of the gospel out into the world. That's what I usually associate the biblical preaching of the gospel is associated with that. I tend to see them as hand in.
I see it as it used to be that, but now it's more this other stuff in this blog.
I do agree with you that there's an income. A lot of the smaller churches who identify themselves as fundamentalists, like for instance Joel Osteen's church, I don't know would call itself a fundamentalist church, or I don't know that I'd identify it as such. It's different than the fundamentalist Bible churches that my friends are associated with.
Right. That's something interesting, is that I never think of an evangelical, of a fundamentalist as the preachers. The preachers, in my sort of view of it, are always evangelicals. But the individual people that you meet aren't always evangelicals. But the ones that are, they go to one of these churches, they're into the money thing, and there's always a politics intermingled.
You're talking about the big preachers, though, right? Like that's the thing, is that in small Bible churches and whatnot that's scattered throughout the middle of the U.S., those preachers are fundamentalists with their congregation.
Yeah, and think about like the person I interacted
fundamental.
with earlier that identifies as an evangelical is Christian Hillbilly, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't see him about the money for this thing.
Like a church like Vineyard, I wouldn't consider to be fundamentalist. It seems to me like fundamentalist is more hardcore than that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Would be, and Calvary Chapel too. Calvary Chapel wouldn't be fundamentalist, though they're conservative in some ways, but they would be evangelical.
Right. So then, what about Bert was saying that all fundamentalists are evangelicals? I don't think I agree with that still.
Saddleback is evangelical. That's Rick Warren's church.
I know that this.
I can only speak from here, so.
This might kind of dip into a topic that I think Helena and I think it was you and Hogtie were going to do eventually, and it has to do with kind of with this article is it time, or do you think that the evangelicals will naturally go through a rebranding process, or do you think that this is going to be the new status quo for them? Because it feels like the results, the current brand of evangelicalism right now, if I were to describe it like that in relation to the article, is based off of the early 20th century doctrines of like the Seventh Day, what were they, Adventists? that just the New Age of like
Yes, yeah,
Protestant.
7-day Adventist. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the policies a lot of the views that the church has. Do you think that is a result from the rebranding of the evangelical name, or the new branding of the evangelical name from back in that doctrine that they've kind of carried on with for like the last 100 years or so, and it's just time for them to move? That they need to, as the article puts it here, that they have to. What does it say here? Is that right now that they are trying to force a halt to moral and spiritual evolution, and is it time for them to to give up that, or is it just going to die out?
I think it might be exactly the right time, because after all, the GOP is trying to separate itself from Trump, right? And so they may make a tactical decision to try to bring the evangelicals along with them, and sort of try to separate themselves from Trump and white nationalism and the kind of, I guess, seedy types that are attracted to Trump that the GOP is so worried about. So this may be the time for rebranding. So maybe it's right on the cusp, and either they rebrand or they fall.
For the last 10 years, more and more churches have been getting rid of their names. I'm like they're no longer going by Methodist. They're no longer going by Presbyterian. They're no longer going by Wesleyan. They're no longer going by Baptist. They're one by one getting rid of their names, calling themselves a community church. This has been a huge thing in California. Boom, 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 boom. And then you're like, what are you? And then you have to dig in and figure out who they actually are and where they came from. So like, is this a Baptist church? What am I getting into? Because they won't brand themselves, right? And then more and more Christian churches are going non-denominational, whatever that means. So what are you?
Non-denominational is like the new hot thing.
Right.
Like if you say, what kind of Christian are you? You can hear non-denominational, and they think they're answering.
Right. Well, because more and more Christians are realizing that there's some conflicts in the denominations, and they're becoming very dissatisfied with certain aspects. Like when someone goes, well, where did you come from? And I tell them that I once was a Baptist, people go, oh, like they just know. But Baptist can mean all sorts of things, like,
I mean that's for sure. Like I think a lot of people, especially sort of the even more moderate than you types, think Baptist, they think, Southern Baptist, like you can't even drink, you can't even dance, right?
I don't smoke, I don't chew, I don't hang with those that do.
Right, yeah. But Baptist can be broad, right? But so like if you had said Southern Baptist, I think you would have gotten even more O's.
No, but the Baptist I came from was Reformed Baptist, so Calvinist-ish Baptist, and then also of Swedish roots. So any Baptist that is of Swedish roots, whether they're actual Anabaptist or Baptist, the Swedish Baptists are usually not they're calmer. They're calmer Baptists. Let's just put it that way.
Right. So you should just say Methodist if you're a Swedish Baptist.
No. I mean, I spent 12 years in the Baptist church, and then I spent another 10 in the Methodist. So like for a while, then I was calling myself non-denominational. After I left working in church in the Methodist church, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna call myself non-denominational, and everybody's like, well, what is that? What does that mean? And then I was
that common? Like not just the last part, but is it? I know this is kind of sidetracked, but it'd be quick. I went from being a Methodist to a Baptist, and then would have considered myself non-denominational as well. So it almost the same thing. Is that a common collective type thing that happens?
It's very common in my area for people to not want to pick a denomination, to feel like nobody has it all right, and to not even be associated with certain doctrines of a denomination. For instance, the negativity the Baptist church tends to wield, because the Baptist title could mean all sorts of things. It could mean extreme liberalism. It can mean independent Baptists like the Duggars.
I can't imagine it meaning extreme liberalism, but the other ones I would go with.
Yeah, like the Jesse Jackson. There you go. I think he's American Baptist.
Yeah, and it can go either way. It can go extreme liberal or extreme conservative too.
American Baptist has always been, that's the thing that's getting to me a little bit, or not getting to me, but I don't want to put it that way, but like getting me in all this is that some of these things have been long established, and I feel like we're coming up to breaking points where denominations are having to choose if they're going to go with society and go with where the culture is moving, or are they going to stick with conservative, right? Like that's the point of conservatism, is to conserve the values of the past. and I actually don't see Donald Trump as being someone who is conservative in those social values, in all of them anyway. There's a lot of people tying their yoke to him when he himself is not. He's not conservative on a lot of social
Not at all.
issues.
Yeah,
Right.
Right. He's not, but he's also not afraid to claim he is for the time being.
And he's
right?
not personally conservative.
Well, he has said that he reads the Bible and whatnot, but he's stuck to somewhat his guns on some of the social issues. Some of the social issues he's held to.
I
For instance,
remember,
Planned Parenthood fund, right?
Yeah.
I remember watching Donald Trump's The Apprentice years ago before it jumped the shark and he brought his kids on board. But I remember one time he was in his office and he was acting like real important and everything, and he scheduled a meeting for Sunday morning. And I was thinking, okay, well, this guy's scheduling meetings to Sunday mornings where conservatives would be in church at the time. So, I don't think, I really don't think Donald Trump reads the Bible or is really into religion that much. I think he's just using it.
But so it's an illustration of what she's saying in her blog, because the evangelicals have attached themselves to him, even though he's clearly not religious, because of the conservative Republican thing he's spouting.
Yeah, not all conservatives are
Presently spouting.
Yeah, not all conservatives are evangelicals, but it almost seems like the majority of evangelicals are conservative.
Well, I mean, again, it goes back to the point of the article, which is just the idea that it's what it gets associated with the brand now, whether or not it's actually true or not. Like we point out, yeah, there could be very liberal evangelicals, but or there could be evangelicals out there that might have different views on issues like sexual orientation or abortion or whatever. The point is that they're not the main they're not the main things that we associate with that anymore.
Right.
The things that do get associated with the title evangelical are always, or as this article puts out, generally much more negative.
Yeah, for sure. And does it seem like they've franchised out?
I don't know, but I did want to get into one thing here. Baldy put I invited Baldy in because he put a question in the side chat. If I can find it again, but yeah, to mention the rift in
the side.
Yeah, that you wanted to mention you wanted to mention the rift in the historical teachings when comparing evangelicals to European and Middle Eastern Christianity, which I cannot talk on, but I mean, if you want to expound on that, that'd be great.
Sure. Before I start, I do want to do a quick disclaimer. I'm not saying that all of European and Middle Eastern Christianity is homogenous. That would be silly. But it is much, much, much similar along the lines of East and West than it is where the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans separate the the great Christian countries, so to speak. Where in European and Middle Eastern you have this thing called deification in the Catholic Church, which is called theosis in the Eastern Orthodox Church, where it's all very synergistic. It's about a working together theologically with God to achieve some sort of holy state and to work in cooperation with grace. If you start spouting that stuff in the Americas, what I've noticed along my travels on the internet,
work-based gospel is not the gospel.
Yeah, works-based gospel, and you get shot. And I've only really noticed this from Americans, save one or two exceptions over here in the UK that I've run into. But it really seems to be a majority American thing where ties to the historical church, such as the patristic sources, medieval theologians and scholasticism, are sort of cut in favor of this me and my Bible mentality, which they've taken further than the reformers would ever have thought possible, I think.
Well, I think the other thing, too, on a side note, is anything that's synergistic is getting kind of thrown into the fire, too. So, like, Methodism, which is one of the closer to Catholicism of the Protestants, because they take a synergistic approach in caring for the poor, I was in a hang where they were talking about how it's the evil of the social gospel, and social gospel's wrong. And I'm like, what? The Methodist Church was instrumental in supporting things like welfares, and that's evil. And it's just like, okay,
Not to
okay.
mention the early church sold all they had and had all things in common. So it's just it's this idea of I think one of the main problems that America is facing, and I actually do agree that there's going to be a rebranding, but I don't think it's going to be a rebranding so much as a going back, because what we're seeing in America is a very slow and steady growth of Eastern Orthodoxy. Catholicism is doing a terrible job in America, sad to say, but the Eastern Orthodox are actually picking up the slack. And we're seeing a lot of as Spackle's just put on the side, lots of bloggers are leading Eastern Orthodox. She's very interested in Eastern Orthodoxy, and it's because the Eastern Orthodox had in the last century or so one of their only evangelizations in the past 1,000 years. They went into America and they set up parishes and churches and bishops, and you suddenly have the Eastern Orthodox churches of America. And they actually have a presence in America, and they are growing, not quickly but steadily. And you'll find that the evangelicals that don't go screw it and drop it all and become atheists or agnostics or some such thing are becoming Eastern Orthodox, which pleases me, although not as much as if they'd become Catholic. But hey, that's personal bias.
I can't. The Pope, man, I can't.
Can I ask Baldy a question? Is that it's not not too long ago we had Pope Benedict, and a lot of people were down on him, and then Francis comes along and says some fairly moderate things for a Catholic Pope, but hasn't overturned the doctrines that people think he has, or hasn't. He's probably
the most misquoted Pope in history, and he's only been Pope for a short time.
Right, sure, and people latch on to some of the things he said as endorsements of things that they find refreshing, but that's not the case. And if you go to many places where the Catholic Church is present or is dominant, if you go down to Brazil or if you go in places in Africa, there's low tolerance for homosexuality, no tolerance for homosexuality. And so it's funny that it's characterized as an American evangelical issue, but it seems to me like the Catholic Church has its own problems in other places in America.
Definitely. We've got massive problems.
Right.
We are in a complete shambles. Next question.
Well, no, I guess my point is that this is getting laid on even as an evangelical problem in America, but these are movements in society that were not present 20 years ago. These are big changes in things that.
Well, when you talk about homosexuality, let's just latch onto that issue with things that we've been seeing in sort of mid-Western African countries. There are massive human rights offences going on there that some bishops and priests may or may not have a hand in. I don't actually know details, so I can't say. But there's also the same sorts of atrocities going off and have been doing the same sort of cycle of violence for the last 1,700 years in Islamic countries. So it's not really a religion problem, I don't think. I think it's a fact that humans are not so nice.
I don't see how that's relevant, though. I mean,
it was something that
was the Catholic Church right now, and you're bringing up Islam.
Well, I'm just saying that where there are prohibitions against certain acts, whether it be sexuality or eating pork, you will find people who will take things to extremes.
Is it not institutionalized intolerance, though? I mean, that's what it seems.
Well, I don't see any evidence of institutionalized intolerance within the Catholic Church's hierarchy. You have to remember the Catholic Church spans hundreds of countries across the world.
What about a
So
doctrine regarding homosexuality, though, is a dogma for the church?
the teaching regarding homosexuality, and this affects me quite a bit considering I'm not straight. The teaching of the church regarding homosexuality is that suffering the temptations of homosexuality is not in and of itself a sin, but homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. We have an apostolate at the moment called Courage. If I could just get this last sentence out. We have an apostolate at the moment called Courage, who I have, because I've done videos on this on my channel, because of my sexuality and the way I deal with things, I often find that it's very helpful for me to talk to other people who have my views and also my issues. And I've recommended an apostolate called Courage, which is all about living a holy life whilst also suffering same-sex attraction. That's the only official Catholic apostolate of ministry to people who suffer same-sex attraction, and it does not advocate for violence towards homosexuals.
Right, and they don't do aversion therapy, things like that.
No.
But
Well, yeah.
but I wanted to say that while you laugh, Bert, and you don't see a difference, I definitely do see a difference. I see a difference between saying you are always just garbage, which is what I'm getting the message from evangelicals loud and clear, especially here on G+.
I don't agree with that. There's a bunch of evangelicals who are all about, money. God will give you money and happiness and that kind of thing.
I don't see that. I don't see I don't mix the evangelical with the televangelist kind of mentality.
I do.
Maybe there are maybe a lot of the ones that are in the mega churches and things like that are evangelical.
To be fair to Xbox's point, there are Catholic televangelists.
Mm-hmm. So I guess when we're I'm trying to collect the thoughts here on this one. One of the lines here at the end of the article is talks about how the evangelical ground is toxic, as she puts it, because of the stated priorities and behaviors of the evangelicals themselves. Now, the way that she has it written out here is desperate to safeguard a archaic set of social and theological agreements. Evangelical leaders bet that if they could secure political power, they could force a halt to moral and spiritual evolution. They themselves wouldn't have to grow and change. Is growing and changing important to the church? And it's not to say that you necessarily have to change your views on every single doctrine that you hold, but should the doctrines themselves evolve in a way that
Yes.
yeah, that you know what I'm saying here with
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look at how Baldy has sort of look at his view now on homosexuality. It's almost there. Right? He's almost there. Whereas
look at Apologia Pro Vita
most
Sua
fundamentalists couldn't do that. A
Cardinal
fundamentalist
Newman, where he
person would
talks
not
about
be
the
able to
development
do
of
that
Christian
kind of
doctrine.
thing because they're stuck saying that no, absolutely not. You deserve to die more than anyone else. So I think we should encourage it.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you do me a test real quick and make sure, Baldy? Can you say something and you tell me if you hear it, Helena, and then repeat, because y'all seem to talk over each other there for a second. And it didn't seem like either one of y'all could notice.
I apologize. It's a bad habit of mine. My fault entirely.
Could you hear that, Helena?
Yes.
Would it be as simple
Did you hear her answer you?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, right on.
I was very rudely talking over her. My apologies.
No.
Do you think it would be as simple as separating these evangelical views from, let's say, politics? I mean, a good example would be, like I said, up in here in Canada, we just had our election, and the topic of God or a lot of these social issues that you hear come up in American politics all the time weren't even a mainstay of any platform that was out there. It was actually just, the election was ran on who best can run the country, not who has the best family values. would that separation of the evangelical views from the political views allow for a more of a growth or spiritual evolution within the states?
Doesn't seem to be helping you at the moment.
Yeah, would you ask that question again? And I just need to hear it again. I think I hear what I hear.
Do you think that the this negative branding that the evangelical term has could be resolved simply by separating the evangelical views from politics, or religious views from politics? Make politics about governance of the country while being able to separate there's necessarily doctrinal things from being a stage, front stage issue within the political arena.
Oh right, yeah. I would
I
have.
think it would be.
It couldn't hurt. Right. Like it couldn't hurt it to separate that. Could it ever soften it back up? I don't know, but
I think it would be a good solution. I think it would be probably the best solution, but I don't see it as being feasible because the Republican Party has gained so much by mingling itself with Christianity. I don't see that they're going to be willing to give that up.
I have a question, just as a point of clarification for the Englishmen in a room of Americans. Is it true that the majority of the black vote goes to the Democrats, at least in the last few elections?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it true that lots of black people in America go to church?
Yeah.
Yes.
Would it also then count that these black people are evangelical or not?
No.
No.
Why not?
No.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes,
Yeah.
they are.
Why are they not? Why are the black gospel churches, which are so iconic, not evangelical?
So the reason why I think that they're still evangelical, but they often will vote left, is they're voting left for their interests. So for some reason, they have been able to separate themselves from the strong arming of, if you don't vote Republican, you're going to vote for an abortionist murderer, and therefore you're an abortionist murderer. They've been able to separate themselves out from that.
I don't think they were ever. I don't think they were ever. Nobody tried to gather them. It's not like they separated themselves out. They weren't gathered in the first place.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's keep in mind that our presidents have been, at least publicly, have been Christians, and many of them actually, Jimmy Carter was a big Southern Baptist or active in the church and in humanitarian efforts, and it's not like they're voting for atheists, right?
That's right. And he was Southern Baptist. I don't think of that as evangelical. I think of him as a Southern Baptist.
Yeah, Southern Baptists are a little bit of a...
Brings us back to the what's an evangelical question.
Right. Southern Baptists and American Baptists are liberals, usually.
I can't think of the name that like the black churches take on, but it's not evangelical. But there is a name, there is a word at least for that type of church settings that you would find for what you're asking.
We have very few African people of African descent in the UK, so it's not that we don't really get churches that are of one ethnicity unless it's the Church of England, and usually that's a lot of old white people.
Yeah, and it's still kind of not great to use like the term black church, right? Because they are mixed. There's no, I mean they don't segregate to segregate. It's just
I know that
the common culture kind of thing.
Sort of happen.
Yeah. Whenever you have a lot of culture kind of thing, you go with your own culture a lot of times. So I'm going to try to see if I can find that term. If not, I'm going to try to make a phone call before we get out of here and see if I can.
Well, over here, it's very much a it's very especially in the Catholic Church where I am. It's very multicultural. I mean, we have Sicilians, we have Polish, we have Romanians, we have English people. We've got people from all over Europe, and we've got people coming in.
Still seems like a lot of white people.
Yeah,
that's the Church of England in white people.
It depends. I mean, where you are, right, Baldy? So, like, I'm in San Diego, and there's a church called All's People's Church, and All's People's Church literally is All's People's Church. You can walk in the congregation, and it's like they're dead center in the inner city of San Diego, and they've got everybody's all mixed in.
You
Then
see,
I
you
could
say
go
things
to
like that, but
another
all we ever
church.
hear coming out from America is it's. And this is just what I hear coming
No,
out of your country from
I was
over
just
the
gonna say
ocean
that
is
really
nothing
quick.
but whites at the throat of blacks and vice versa.
I was just going to say that in other churches, sometimes you'll see this separation in culture. It's like, here's the Hispanic church, here's the black church. I don't have the answer why that happens. I think some of it's language, some of it's musical choices, cultural things that seem to divide, at least here. And then when it comes to the South, I'm not really sure if they're segregated just because things are still pretty.
Yeah, the church I went to for
there.
10 years was a Korean Bible church on a college campus, and primarily Koreans there. A lot of good kimchi. I wanted to come back to the topic of what's an evangelical, though, because I feel like there's a lot of baggage that's being accumulated by that label, but I've only ever taken that to be that it's a church primarily rooted in the Bible and Scripture, and not in other traditions that are informing either the exercise of worship or faith, or that it's a church where you're going to get a 45-minute elucidation of a piece of text, or
Would it be
sermon.
fair just to say that a church where it's a guy who says it's my Bible and me, and also a personality show for an hour or two?
It's pretty much it. It's a lot of Bible studies. It's a lot of that's the way I've taken evangelicalism to be in America, and then fundamentalism is a subset within that, and that there are other flavors of evangelicals within America, which is why you have Southern Baptists are evangelicals, and then you have Assembly of God would be evangelical charismatics.
Yeah, it's really a stupid word. I mean, it's a stupid word.
It's just a broad term.
Especially
I think
now that it's nothing but a stereotype, and,
Right.
and a negative one at that. As the article is trying to point out.
Yeah, and I think, and that's the idea, is that I think that anybody that believes that they're following the teaching of that they're following is their beliefs are in accordance with the Gospels of Christianity would consider themselves evangelical.
Well,
but
doesn't biblical Christian just answer it?
The interpretations of what that means to be in accordance with the teachings of the Gospels is where the variation is, and we only link the negative aspects to the term evangelical. And I think that's the entire point of the article.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 2 a.m. here, and I have confession tomorrow, so I'm going to go to sleep.
Don't oversleep.
I need to actually take care of something real quick.
Also, there's nothing wrong with you, Baldy.
Yeah, I got you.
So we're gonna
nothing wrong with me.
I think that what we're gonna do is we're gonna shut her down here. If we wanna, if you wanna open up this another half room just to continue this on with anybody that wants to jump in, that's in the chat. I think that we've kind of exhausted the main point of the article.
I reckon pretense are real if you want a more Eastern Orthodox view on evangelicalism.
All right.
Just saying.
Sure. Yeah. So anybody, X, are you okay with that?
Yep. I'll open up a Hangout and I will post the link. I'll get into the Deeper Dogma chat and I will post it in the description below, since you can't do comments. I will, for anybody that wants to go to the after show, I'll post the Hangout link in the description of this video.
Perfect. Thanks everybody for coming out. It's been great. I have parenting stuff to do for a little bit here. So thanks everybody for watching. I'm going to try to do another couple of these. If they're not every week, I'm going to try to make them bi-weekly for the next little time here. But thanks everybody for tuning in, and talk to you guys later.
Thanks so much.